you're not going to get anything you deserve unless you ask for it. Like, it's very rare that someone is just going to give you an opportunity. If you believe
Yeah.
that there's something you're meant to do or to try out, you have to ask for it. And that's not an easy skill set to build. We're living in an era where we're constantly task switching, constantly code switching when we're talking to different people. And now with ChatGPT, we're getting access to so much information. Whereas, we're losing our ability to actually focus on something that is more abstract. Tattoo ink is one of those areas among like food dyes and pesticides where we kind of just assume that people are being responsible, like the manufacturers, but they're not. And I think there is a strong link between autoimmune disease and like tattooing.
So if you ever come across a company that's doing some kind of NZT drug, call me.
That's funny. Yeah, one could arguably say that the military has funded a lot of these types of drugs already. There's a long
Yeah.
history of the military using psychoactive drugs to make their soldiers, military professionals, just like cognitively superior.
Welcome to a new episode of the podcast. I'm extremely excited for this one. It's the first time we get a guest who's from the VC space. So welcome to Samantha Tabone.
Hi, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. So the first thing I really want to start this off with is you obviously have a very interesting background going from academia, now in the VC space. And particularly the way you guys invest is pretty unique from a lot of other funds that you kind of see. So I just first want to get an idea of what you currently do, what your current role is, and what is XEIA?
Yeah, so XEIA stands for Cross-Disciplinary Exploration, Investment, and Acceleration. It's an acronym. We actually refer to it as XEIA Venture Partners.
XEIA.
But my current role, XEIA. I'm currently a general partner at XEIA Venture Partners. I joined about a year after the founding partner started this as a solo general partner in 2021. And right now we're investing in pre-seed and seed stage companies, which, for those who aren't familiar, pre-seed is kind of like right when a company gets started. So we like to go early. And we're investing in biotech, tech bio companies, medical device companies. Another way you could think of them is deep tech or brain computer interfaces. And really, our broader mandate at XEIA Venture Partners is to enable human three, or the fruition of human three, which another way to think about human three is enabling the next epoch of human health, well-being, and performance, investing in companies that are trying to solve problems that modern medicine has just failed us with. Great example is across all of neuro, whether it be neurodegenerative disease or psychiatry. We've done a lot of investing there. And so we're investing out of our second fund. We invested in 26 companies in Fund One, which you can see on our website. But yeah, we're active and we're looking for new companies to invest in right now.
Hint, hint.
Yes, exactly.
That's great. Well, I'd love to dig into the human three concept a little bit further. It's more than just the companies you invest in, right? The whole like philosophy or at least the way you guys are envisioning it, from what I understand. But how does one even get into VC? How did you get into the space?
It's a great question. I'm really grateful that I'm in VC now full time because it makes my unconventional, chaotic career path seem like it makes sense. I get to tie my entire career in a neat little bow called VC now. But, I actually am a first generation university student. My father and my family is from Europe, a place called Malta, and I'm the first person in my family to go to college. So I realized early on that I knew a little bit. I knew what I wanted to do. And I also didn't know what I didn't know. So I knew I liked science, and I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto, focused on specializing in chemistry, actually. But very early on, I could tell that I just didn't have the context for what job options there were. I didn't even know what engineering and consulting was until I was in my third year of university. So I made it my goal to work with as many different companies as possible to kind of build a map of what my job options and career options were.
Hmm.
And in doing so, I actually started to build kind of like a little bit of a niche practice in helping really early stage companies translate. So, one of the catalysts for this is that I got a position in a research lab at the University of Toronto that had experience spinning companies out and taking that science and turning it into a
Hmm.
business. And naturally just started working with lots of companies in Canada that were doing that, first as a project manager, and then eventually I learned how to raise money. And so for 10 years, I built this practice of helping companies form licensing technology, growing the company. And I think the thing that really gave me a little bit of an edge is that I was always very interested in the science and I kept up with the technical
Hmm.
details. And so I spoke both
Right.
languages. But, during this process, I had a lot of people telling me that what I was doing didn't make sense, that I should go work for a big company,
Hmm.
that, it didn't make sense how I was working with multiple companies at one time, too many projects going on. But that's where I felt really happy and I felt like I was making the most impact. And so eventually, actually, around 5 or 6 years into this, I started to get requests to do consulting work for different family offices and venture capital funds, mainly doing technical due diligence, but also helping do a quick analysis of whether a company was going to succeed and what they could do to maybe,
Hmm.
salvage the company, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so, yeah, that kind of got me exposed to the, I guess, venture side. So I'd been working with a lot of venture capital funds in a different capacity, helping companies raise money. But then I started working for
Okay.
them. And that's actually how I met my current business partner, Braun
While you
Rexer,
were
who's the
working,
founding GP of XEIA. Yeah, well, no. So basically, someone referred me to
okay.
him as a technical due diligence consultant. And then eventually I just ended up working full time with him because our views on what we would want to invest in were very similar. And he asked me to, join his partner, which I did. And now we're raising the second fund together. So it was a very nonlinear path for
Hmm.
sure.
It's almost, yeah, a little bit of a spiral, but when you look at it now, it makes sense, so to speak. Almost like
Yeah.
they say your career path is more of like an upward spiral, less than just a straight path. So it kind of resembles that. But thanks for the
Yeah.
whole timeline. I can definitely relate to some aspects to that in terms of the uni days and not even knowing. I didn't even know what consulting was like not too long ago. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you definitely explore and see your options. And I think that your path going through all the different sectors gives you really profile that nobody really has access to. And in the VC space, when you're here, obviously looking at all the potential companies you can invest in, it helps to know that you've worked in some of the sectors. You have an idea of how it works and especially the science behind it.
Yeah.
So you can do your due diligence correctly.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I don't know if you had this experience too, but it's almost as if when you're trying to figure out what your career path is going to be, especially with a STEM degree, there are a certain set of jobs that, people will tell you you can get into. You can, be a wet lab specialist and work as a technician or an
Yeah.
RA. You can go and work for pharma. You can go to big consulting, but you must get an MBA first. And
Yeah.
it's a very common topic and a very easy to say that I'm contrarian in the sense that you don't need to do those things, but like you really don't need to do those things. And I think one of the things that really helped me propel myself forward was that I had two tenets. The first was I want to expose myself to as many environments as possible so that I understand what it is I don't want to do,
Mhm. Yeah.
because narrowing it down and knowing what it is that you're not going to thrive in is important. But the second thing is that I always kind of remembered, a professor once told me this: you're not going to get anything you deserve unless you ask for it. Like it's very rare that someone is just going to give you an opportunity to get exposed to something new. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, if you believe that there's something you're meant to do or to try out, you have to ask for it. And that's not an easy skill set to build.
No, it definitely takes a bit of courage to do that. But no, I fully agree. You have to open your own doors yourself, right? You can't just wait for the door to be open. You gotta force them almost. But yeah, no, I did have actually a similar kind of experience over exchange. I started doing some sales work. I was full on salesperson. That I got into research. This year, I did a research program with some labs in the neural space as well, actually, just to get a taste
Oh,
of the research space and seeing if I enjoy that because I kind of gave up the biochemistry route. But as you say, it's learning what you don't want to do, and then you eventually kind of find where your skills match and what you actually enjoy. On the point of the podcast, I'm curious to know what was it like starting it? Because what was it Brahm that was starting it before you were mentioning, and that's how you kind of started the initial fund. And what are some of the perhaps unexpected benefits, like the conversations you had with people, as you were mentioning before, deal flow was a big aspect that the podcast brought to the fund. But yeah, break that down.
yeah. So, Brahm started the podcast actually, and he can tell you all about it if you want to talk to him one day. But essentially, he had an influx of both investors that wanted to invest in psychedelics specifically, because that was what Brahm was covering at the time, and also
Yeah.
people trying to start companies in this space. And he decided that he should just start a fund. And so you could say that he found limited partners for the fund and opportunities for investing that way. But he also met a lot of cool people along the way that were already, they were fundraised, they were CEOs of companies that had capital, and he talked to a lot of really interesting researchers too. And I think that type of content is really useful for emerging markets that, and when I say emerging markets, I'm not referring to geographies, but just like emerging business verticals
Hmm.
specifically. It's always interesting when there's some kind of theme that people are interested in, because on the private side, when companies are not public, it's hard to get that information. And so I think a lot of people see value in that. And
Right.
now that I joined the podcast kind of with Brom, now him and I do the podcast together, we've been able to broaden the scope of what we talk about. So you'll often find me asking really detailed technical questions, and Brom brings it back to reality. But I think we definitely get the opportunity to showcase our existing portfolio company founders too, which I think is helpful for them.
For sure, for sure. I mean, me personally, I found like so many benefits of just talking to people, and then the fact that you speak to one interesting person, your perspectives that they bring and the network that they bring is just so valuable, really, to anything that you do moving forward. Um, but I want to dig deeper a little bit now into the concept really of the human three vision you guys have, and what that materializes itself as in terms of the startups you guys invest in. Could you break down
Okay.
maybe some of
Yeah.
the recent investments, like what companies exist and what the philosophy is of the human three epoch, if you will?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that, on our website, we break down these five specific criteria that we look for in companies. And all of our portfolio companies have at least two or three of these criteria, and some have all of them.
Mhm.
And the criteria are generally within this category of, can this company enable a step change? Are they going to disrupt their market and not just create an incremental product that is marginally better than something that
Mhm.
exists? Another one, for example, is there a history of real world evidence for these products that are being developed? And so we have like a very formal criteria, but to give you some tangible examples, one of the companies we invested in is a company called Xylo Bio. And Xylo is a therapeutics company that is trying to create a new class of drugs. And they have. Now they're going into humans next year. But this new class of drugs is essentially supposed to treat different neuropsychiatric disorders with the same efficacy that we see with the psychedelic class of drugs, but without the hallucinations,
Okay.
and also without some of the other side effects that kind of come from psychedelics that are not actually obvious to a lot of people.
Mhm.
And so the goal there, why we feel that that's a human three company, is because they're trying to enable a broader population to access the therapeutic benefit of this frontier class of new drugs called psychedelics, but in a way that is safer and easier accessed more generally.
Mhm.
And Xylo is amazing. I mean, they're developing drugs that really target a very specific receptor that is affiliated with psychedelics.
Okay,
But they're forging like a whole new realm of drugs in the psychiatric space, which is not common. So I'm excited about that.
for sure. And
And another example, I'm trying to think of another company. Sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say
no, I was
something?
good. I was going to dive a bit more into Xylo and really what stage they were at in terms of the clinical trials. Has it been tested on people, as you were saying? And that was the next phase, right?
Yeah, so we had actually invested in Xylo 3 years ago when they were
Right.
pre-seed. That was actually my first project with XEIA. And now they've developed a drug after, developing a platform, and they are about to enter human trials next year. And so they've spent 4 years doing intense discovery and development on their platform side, and they've reached the stage where they have a development candidate, which is just before you go into these studies called IND enabling studies, which allow you to then go into humans.
Okay. And how does that compare in terms of the sector with the pharma space? Is it almost a competition in comparison to that?
I see.
How are
Yeah.
the times as well? Is it shortened in terms of the trials, the same regulatory barriers?
Yeah. So generally, when biotech companies are doing drug discovery, they are preclinical and they take some time to get a drug ready for humans.
Mhm.
That isn't necessarily competitive with the broader pharma sector. So, pharmaceutical companies, for the most part, are actually focused on later stage clinical trials and commercialization once the drug is approved.
Mhm.
That's what the infrastructure they have has been really successful at. And so a lot of the times you'll have, if you want to think about it this way, you could think of therapeutics companies or drug discovery companies as being, sorry about that, earlier stage. Um, and,
Yeah,
before pharma gets involved. And then pharma is kind of like they're thought of as later stage partners for some of these drugs that are being discovered because very rarely do companies start from drug discovery and then own the asset all the way through to approval.
right.
So oftentimes you'll see once companies start getting into humans, they begin having conversations with pharmaceutical companies for business development deals and partnerships.
Mhm. Just to dive a bit more, is that something that's going to stay, do you think, that the pharma is going to remain important for that commercialization aspect? Or is that something that private companies can now start to maybe explore? And is that viable in terms of the market, the approval, and so on?
It's an interesting question, because I think pharma was, is, and always will be very critical for the commercialization of drugs. They just have so much money. And rolling out a drug after approval is really expensive. Phase 3 clinical trials are very expensive.
Mhm.
And so, the metric that is often cited is that to take a drug from identifying the target all the way through to drug approval is about
Oh, wow.
$1 billion in 10 years. But, people are trying to compress those timelines. I will say that it's very unlikely that we'll see pharma disappear as a main enabler of a lot of the commercialization that we see across all modalities and therapeutic areas.
Mhm.
However, there are some companies that will go to IPO to try and raise more money to finish their clinical
Okay.
trials. So, what's interesting is that some generalist investors I've talked to are really shocked to hear that a lot of biopharma companies or like mid stage biotech companies will IPO before their drug is even approved.
Mm.
It's actually a very common phenomenon. And so, in some specialty areas, I could see some companies owning assets all the way through to maybe phase 3, maybe enabling the phase 3 funding with an IPO. But I still think pharma ultimately gets involved for the commercialization and distribution of those drugs.
Mhm.
It's not impossible. There are stories of companies going from the beginning all the way to the end. There's definitely plenty of those, but I think generally speaking, pharma has to be involved at some point. Um, and pharma's been doing a lot of strategic investing lately as well. So they have their own venture capital funds too that will invest in early stage
Mhm.
companies to try and get in there early, sort of thing.
Yeah, really like streamline the entire process from the conception of the drug itself and his research into the actual
Yeah.
commercialization. That's cool. I'm curious. I suppose this is more of a pharma question, but obviously the big bottleneck, which it makes sense, right, to have the clinical trials be of a certain duration and test on humans before you roll it out to the general population. But are there any things that you're currently seeing that are promising to shorten those times, as you were mentioning before?
Yeah, I actually think that we're going to see a significant compression in those timelines for a number of reasons. One of the more commonly cited themes, if you will, is patient stratification. So using new types of assays or biological tools and or AI and machine learning to better select patients that will better respond to a drug. So a lot of the problem in some of these clinical trials is that number one, are dealing with a very heterogeneous population and you are trying to treat them all for the same disease that maybe actually is in reality like 10 different types of diseases. But for now, we only know it as this one disease, which is Alzheimer's
Hmm.
disease. And so once we get a better understanding of how to more precisely diagnose individuals, but also then how to precisely engineer treatments unique for that subtype, I think there's been a lot of discourse in how we can do phenotyping and patient stratification well. Lots of companies that are being started trying to, sell their AI tool to pharma companies on how to better select for
Hmm.
patients. But ultimately, I think the best way to show that you can do that well is by doing it. So I
Yeah.
don't think we're going to see a bunch of AI companies, being super successful by selling software to pharma. I think it's going to be like a big, gigantic company like Zera Therapeutics, which is a company that recently raised $1 billion to try and implement AI for the purpose of compressing this timeline
Hmm.
into really just showing quickly how well patient selection works with these new tools. The other thing I would say is that I think from a regulatory perspective, there is a shift in mindset happening, not just at the FDA, but with regulatory agencies globally, where they're trying to figure out how to streamline studies and require less animal studies. And
Okay.
so that could, for instance, make it easier to start doing first in human studies. I will share that not a lot of people know this, but in places like Australia, there are some countries around the world where you can relatively easily, if you show safety, get a drug into humans and do phase 1 trials. So a lot of companies will do their phase 1 trials in Australia before going to the FDA in the United States because it's much easier to do so.
Interesting.
So I think there's definitely some regulatory aspect to it too.
Cool. I suppose it also starts with the research itself and understanding the disease before you stratify your patients a certain way, right? So um, the research stays key, right, at academia. And a question I have on the point of these pre-seed companies and research labs, in a sense, who are developing these therapeutics, how do they compare to traditional, I would say traditional, if you say like just a regular tech pre-seed startup, because now you have to do the due diligence of the actual research that they are using, right, to create their drug. Their drug isn't approved at all. It's perhaps just an idea or it's based on some paper. I don't know how it works exactly, but how does the process work of doing that due diligence check?
Yeah, it's definitely that's a great question. I think in tech, pre-seed tech companies, they show you some kind of like beta version of an app and they show you an assumptions list of how they're going to generate revenues. And that's basically
Yeah,
it. I mean,
it's
you
like,
can do checks on the
do you have
people.
a good idea? And if so, then yeah,
Yeah,
probably works. But
exactly. But in biotech, as you sagely mentioned, there's a lot more to it. And so we try to stratify our diligence in 4 or 5 general ways. We look at the IP because we believe that, even though we're investing in some tech bio companies and also a few consumer companies, we actually believe that the FDA is a really great moat for IP and for value creation.
Mhm.
And so the IP is important because, there's only a certain time limit that you have with an asset under composition of matter. And depending on how well you are operating, you should be able to get that into humans to allow yourself exclusivity to sell the drug after a certain point. And so
Mhm.
we look at whether the IP is solid. We also look at the scientific rationale. Does the science make sense? Is this person taking a scientific leap of faith that is different and is it going to inform a new understanding of this basic research?
Mhm.
So what I mean by that is, we want people who are taking some kind of leap of faith because we don't want iterative, very derivative ideas trying to commercialize when it's already been tried and done before. And that actually is the hardest part in trying to look at what someone's doing, figure out what they're really trying to do, and compare it to maybe what's been done before and what other companies in the same space are doing. It's actually very difficult to do because sometimes people will add new technology and new buzzwords to try and make something that exists seem totally different. And so we spend a lot of time getting past all the AI mentions and AI and drug
Yeah.
discovery mentions and really just drill into fundamentally what it is that they're doing. And so IP, scientific rationale, team. We obviously we're investing super
Yeah.
early. And so the team diligence is sometimes the most important thing. Is this person uniquely qualified to execute on the idea that they're trying to, commercialize? That's a big one.
Mhm.
And then the last area is like operational know-how or operational constraints. So this one isn't as obvious, and it's where I lean on my operations experience to kind of suss out. But oftentimes, especially in the Bay Area, a lot of people get very excited about what it is that they can do or what they want to do.
That's the
And
typical stereotype. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's definitely like sometimes there's a little bit of loss of touch of reality. And so really trying to understand what it is that they're hoping to get done. Sorry, I have someone that keeps walking behind me back and forth. He said he's done walking back and forth now. But yes, so I think just getting people to be more realistic with their timelines and what it is that they're trying to achieve with the raise and what milestones they want to reach with the $2 million, for example, that they're raising.
Right.
That also is where we spend a lot of time thinking.
Interesting, interesting. There's a few points I want to go back on, but first, I suppose you're also obviously very close with a lot of these research companies and labs. I'm not sure how they reach out to you or if you have obviously a pre-existing set of connections, but how do you make that bridge really between current research labs who maybe obviously that points to the founder profile and whether or not they want to take it forward into an industry um, sector and commercialize it. But how do you make the bridge really between the research lab itself, whether that be the educational institution, a lot of universities, or are they private research labs, and build that product that they or the research that they publish into an industry ready product or therapeutic?
Yeah, the deal sourcing is really interesting because once you start to produce content like we have, and also, it's announced that we get into some really interesting and exciting deals early, we get a lot of cold inbound. So a lot of people reaching out to us.
Yeah.
But we've done a lot of work to, we call it shaping the ecosystem. So a lot of VCs will observe and integrate themselves into the ecosystem by going to conferences and, participating in accelerator demo days like Nucleate has, their activator that they do every year. Nucleate Canada was just established recently.
Okay.
There are a lot of organizations like that, but we try to shape it as well. So we have more involved relationships with different tech transfer offices at some major universities like Johns Hopkins and MIT. We have advisors and people in our network that have successfully started companies before that are also researchers who also, know a lot of young people that are trying to start new companies. And so I spend a lot of my time as a mentor to some of these academic affiliated, like translational
Yeah.
hubs, where the whole purpose is to get government funding to translate this technology into something that's commercializable. And because this is what I've done for my entire career, I volunteer my time to help out some of these companies. And once in a while, we actually invest in some of them too.
Okay.
So a good example of this is I'm a mentor for the NIH's Blueprint MedTech program, which is specifically meant for neurotechnology. And I review grants, I mentor companies, I participate in, panels. And recently we invested in a company called Vinova, which is involved with this organization. And so, it's not an immediate turnaround per se. We do this to try and, share our learnings as well.
Mhm.
But it's definitely a lot of proactive network building. And then, things kind of happen over time. Like, for example, I host a lot of dinners in San Francisco, and we met a really amazing founder who came to one of our dinners, like, I don't know, in March, and we ended up investing in his
Oh,
company.
cool.
So just creating the environment for people to have free form discussion, I think is really key in attracting like really amazing thought leaders.
No, no, for sure. And it brings you to people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. I think I saw at some point you started a run club as well in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually that's been pretty successful. So that for example, that as well is a way for us to meet new founders, but also other investors too. And yeah, it's surprising how many people run. I didn't realize how many people were into running,
Well,
but
especially
it's been
since
working
the
out.
COVID days, now a lot more people run.
Yeah,
I myself have started running, or I've always kind of ran, but like the past 2 years, I've been running more and more. So if I come to San Francisco, I'd love to join
really.
one of the sessions.
Oh yeah, you should. Are you on Strava?
Yeah, I am. I probably have like
Okay, we can follow each
5
other.
followers on that.
I really like it. I one time, yeah, you get varying levels of uh, into running, if you will. So usually I'll do a 3 mile, like we did a 3 mile yesterday with 4 people. In Boston, I had a 4 mile with like 10 people. And
Mm.
so it really is pretty interesting. But there was one guy who came to San Francisco for JP Morgan. Shout out to Matt Burkhart at B Labs in Philadelphia. But he is like a really good runner. And he gave me pre-reading, like scientific articles to read before I run, and we spent 9 miles talking about like
Oh
astrocytes and
shit.
microglia. Yeah. So it's very fun for sure.
I suppose everyone has their way to run a little bit further. Maybe I should start
Yeah,
reading
I
some
don't know about you, but I can't run and talk.
No, I like to yeah, just not talk, just like look around and just run. I mean,
You said you were reading something, you
no,
started
no,
reading
I should probably
something.
start reading scientific articles before I go to run and just like think about them or something. Maybe I'll like it'll
Yeah.
occupy my time. But I want to go back to at the start you mentioned handling multiple projects in your career. Now as well, obviously you have all these different mentorship roles, also this dinner, run club. How do you handle all these projects at once while getting stuff done in more or less all of them, or the ones that you want to get stuff done? Because this is something I struggle with myself as well. So I'd love to get your
Yes.
opinion on this.
I spent the entire decade of my 20s taking any and every meeting because I wanted to learn from people. And I think once you start to get into a very focused group, you can very easily be judicious about the meetings that you take. But it's still a lot. Like I will sometimes try and block out a whole week where I don't have any calls just so that I can go through. emails, do the writing that I want to do some due diligence that I want to do. And it's becoming increasingly challenging, admittedly, because, Brahm and I, we're just a partner, a firm of two partners, and that's it. We don't have any associates. It's really a small team.
Mhm.
So I think the way I do this generally is I have this app called Sunsama, and I will map out what I want to do each day. But, I always allow myself time in the morning to clear my inbox and really just try to make two goals for the day. If I achieve one of them, that's great. If I achieve both of them, that's good. But the the networking aspect of this, so adding in like the events, the dinners, the mentoring, the run club on top of all of this, I don't have a structured schedule. I kind of just arrange them as I go.
Mhm.
And over time, I find that a dinner will just happen to naturally coalesce if I'm talking to a lot of the same type of investor in one week. So I might just very quickly send a few emails out, one liners like, hey, would you want to meet for dinner in 2 weeks? I could bring a few of my founders who are in this space to the dinner to talk about what they're working on.
Mhm.
And so you're kind of constantly on. And it does definitely get challenging sometimes.
But I suppose that that's almost better than having a fixed schedule, let's say, or dinner every week, because it almost makes it less authentic at times when you're trying to force people into the same room when there's not really a point to do so.
Exactly.
So interesting. Is there any way that you prioritize tasks in your day? You're saying your Sansema app, but are there any like frameworks? Because I don't know, I read into stuff like that, but I was wondering if you use anything.
I've realized that there are tons of project management software tools that one can use to help themselves. And really, it's not even the tool that matters so much as it is, are you giving your brain the space and your body the space it needs to be effective? And so, if you have calls, I just try to stack all of my calls in 1 or 2 days in a week.
Mhm.
And, I don't do like a full call day when I have a lot of like in-person events because that tends to be too much.
Mhm.
But literally the most effective tip I have is obviously prioritize your health and exercise, but also take time to do like leisure reading so your brain has a chance to focus on something.
Mhm.
Because I realize that increasingly we're living in an era where we're constantly task switching, constantly code switching when we're talking to different people. And now with ChatGPT, we're getting access to so much information. Whereas, we're losing our ability to actually focus on something that is more abstract. And so I think the reading, even for like half an hour a day, really
Yeah.
helps. It like resets your brain somehow. So I don't really have any specific tips on how to prioritize tasks, but I think the other thing I'll say is it's really hard when you're trying to build a network and you work in an industry that is very relationship based to pass up meetings because I can guarantee you if I had a week that was full of calls, as long as you're filtering for high quality discussion, all of them will be useful at some point. But it's about being thoughtful about the opportunity cost that is lost when you actually go and do work that doesn't involve networking.
Mhm.
So this is really applicable to people who are in very people facing jobs. If you're networking all the time, that's great. But you have to make sure that when you're not doing that, again, you're giving yourself time to reset and breathe. You're tending to your responsibilities operationally. But another chunk of that is making sure that you're able to dedicate some time to high impact creative work. And that is, I think, something that a lot of people kind of, you know, prioritize last. I think people should be prioritizing that as like number one, honestly, before anything else.
No, for sure.
I know it's like a very, very complicated way of answering that
No,
question.
no, no, but it's great because the question is complicated and the answer, it's not easy, right, to know what to do. Because many times if you go on to work and assume that this is a very productive session, really you're ignoring the higher level thinking and wondering really why are you doing this low level work at times. And so having this creative outlook definitely is important. There was a recent talk as well. Well, there's these events in Montreal with a certain club, and one uh, girl had this talking, especially just about this creative. branch really of yourself. And as soon as you kind of tap into that a bit more, and it's difficult to place it in your schedule because it's not like you're not getting any work done, but you get so many benefits in addition
You do.
to just feeling better. So um
It's really tough though. I was going to ask
yeah.
you, when you try to do your creative work, do you feel like you kind of need the day completely away from phone calls and interacting with others? Because it's a headspace that you have to get yourself into, really focus on that, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know how you found it, but I find it difficult to just immediately switch into an hour of deep work after a podcast or
Oh,
something.
for sure. For me, I have a few like different things that I can do. One of them is running just to get my mind off things. The other is playing guitar. So I like to play guitar in the afternoons, but I do it at the end of the day once I get like the work out of the way in my day's work. But yeah, as you were saying, I also take like at least a day in the week completely off of any work because otherwise I would like stress over it. But one thing I want to come back on, obviously you probably get, I'm guessing, hundreds pitch decks a day, if not a week. I'm just curious, what makes any message stand out, and have you gotten any unique ones? Like, have you gotten one from the mail, some in-person visits, some interesting approaches?
That's interesting. No, we haven't gotten anything in the mail yet. We do get a ton of inbound every day. And honestly, some of the cold outreach, whether it be via LinkedIn or email, that makes it across to us and stands out the most is a one or two liner. And usually it has a very simple explanation of what they're trying to do in a sentence. We're raising pre seed capital for this type of thing. We think XA would be good because of this. Can we please talk? Very to the point. Because we get so much, it's it's actually, it sounds really bad, but if we see like a long email, it's hard to read it or to like pick out very quickly what it is that the company is trying to do. So, I wish there was something that sounds better than that, but that's been interesting. We've also gotten a lot of like verbal pitches at some of these events that I was saying that are pretty
Mhm.
interesting. And I think those are cool because they start out in a non-pitch environment where someone's telling us about something they're passionate about. And so, coming to the run club, coming to events that we throw, and just talking about why you're passionate about what you're doing and what it is that you think we could help with specifically. Whether it be the network or the capital, I think that type of assertive, directive request really goes a long way a lot of the time.
And you don't find that it's too direct at times, rather that it kind of cuts through the noise of the hundreds of messages you get.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's never too direct. I think that's probably the best thing when you're trying to cut through the noise. And sometimes we even miss those. So, it's difficult. In terms
I'm
of
gonna start texting
interesting,
VCs, give me $1 million.
yeah, yeah. You should just be like, hey, I'm raising $1 million for this idea. I know that you invest in these types of companies. Are you interested in having a chat? We're looking to raise in the next like 2 months or
I'm
something.
definitely writing that down.
And you can even include a link for your
Yeah.
booking just so that you make it easier for them too. But um, we've had some people really take a lot of time to look at our investment thesis and kind of try to fit why it is that their idea makes sense for us. And sometimes that is difficult because we want to actually learn what the founder is trying to do before we decide whether they meet our criteria. So,
Mhm.
you know, that's cool. But a lot of the time it's in a natural organic setting where the pitch isn't formal that we remember things the most.
Mhm. No, it's good. It's good getting an opinion from the VC side because founders always say this is how you should reach out to people and best outreach techniques, but it's cool to see what actually works. Um, One thing I'm curious about is if in some hypothetical scenario you would have to start your own startup and not invest in the projects that you see, Is there any particular area of interest that you would dive into or something on your mind?
Oh, there are so many things on my mind. I actually think I'm going to start putting out shorts of me talking to the
Yeah.
camera about exactly this, like what kind of startups I want to see. And a lot of them are probably in reproductive and sexual health, both for women and men. I think we need more interesting stuff there. But if I actually had to start a company myself, I've been thinking about this a lot.
Mhm.
So this has nothing really to do with human three. Well, maybe it does in some extent, like from the neuro perspective. It's more of a human three idea from the general longevity and health perspective.
But
But
you would invest in your
um,
own startup too.
well, we would incubate it,
Yeah,
but I haven't told you the idea yet. So I want to get what you get your thoughts
for
on
sure.
this. But a lot of millennials, which, I am a millennial. I'm an elder millennial, I think. Am I? I'm not sure. We all have people we know that have a ton of tattoos. And I have realized that the tattoo ink industry is unregulated. I've also learned that tattoo ink is a very slow rate of absorption, but it accumulates in our lymph nodes. And so there's evidence of people who have a ton of tattoos post-mortem, like dye has accumulated in some of their lymph nodes.
Mhm.
And I do think that this is somehow contributing to autoimmune disease. And I think there's a way to leverage like maybe macrophage science or some other science to try and clear the lymph nodes of this like dye accumulation. But I also think there might be an interesting thought around trying to come up with tattoo removal strategies that aren't necessarily laser because, and not because I want people to remove their tattoos, but because there are certain tattoo inks that actually react with UV rays from the sun way more than others. I can say from experience because I have some tattoos.
I
But
was gonna ask that.
basically they will absorb UV radiation more than most ink molecules, and it actually causes the tattoos to raise and actually like react to the sunlight. And it's not very good. So
Is it the ink
obviously
itself or is it the color or
there's a specific type of molecule called azo dyes,
okay.
and the azo structure absorbs UV radiation much more effectively than other types of dye
Yeah.
structures. And so, for instance, there are some of my tattoos that I have where if I'm in the sun, the black ink will like raise and it'll almost look like it's a 3D tattoo. It's very weird.
Interesting.
Um,
Well, at least it looks
so I
kind of
think
cool if it's like 3D.
it's a kind of scary. Um, but I think that, you know, tattoo ink is one of those areas among like food dyes and pesticides where we kind of just assume that people are being responsible, like the manufacturers, but they're not. And I think there is a strong link between autoimmune disease and like tattooing, but also many other things as well. So this is a request for anyone listening who maybe is trying to start a company in this space. Please talk to us. We're interested in the tattoo removal slash clearance of tattoo dye
Yeah,
business. Let us know.
for sure. I've never heard of that one actually. On the point of
Yeah.
autoimmune disease, I remember one of my courses in like immunology or something, and it was in the theory that helminths and these worms were completely negatively correlated with the appearance of autoimmune diseases, mostly in the West, where you don't get almost at all, maybe it's a tracking issue, of these autoimmune diseases, for example, in large parts of Africa, some in Asia, which was the complete opposite map of the appearance of, or how would you call it, the epidemic of worms and helminth diseases um, carried by either like mosquitoes or so on. But it's interesting to look at that as well. Maybe there's some therapy to derive from worms that could prevent some autoimmune disease.
Interesting. We should chat about that. That sounds like I don't know a ton about like parasitic worm infections and Helminth diseases,
Yeah,
but it's interesting. This idea of us being a host for things like parasites, but also viruses and bacteria as
Yeah.
well is really interesting. Have you heard about the hypothesis that links HIV and like HPV infections to maybe Alzheimer's disease prevalence?
No, I did not see that.
So yeah, there's some studies that are looking at like the link between HPV, like human papillomavirus, which is common in a lot of people,
Hmm.
and Alzheimer's disease, but also I think HIV too. And the gut microbiome is an area that we've looked at before as well, and how like the gut health can really influence your overall health too.
Yeah.
Um, but we haven't made any investments there yet.
Interesting. Yeah, it's curious to wonder really how much we really know about the human body. In our notes, I had written something on eventually perhaps data-driven algorithms are gonna surpass, right, our knowledge, or maybe they already have how they understand us. And so it it creates an interesting dynamic as to how you trust the data to understand the human body, whether like certain diseases are linked to other ones, and it's extremely complex, right? It can vary between individuals. So, uh, do
Yeah.
you think that in this increasingly data-driven world, we'll see more, at least, of an understanding of the human body and therefore uh, treatments for certain diseases?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. There's this concept called network medicine and systems biology, which is a separate discipline, is very adjacent to network medicine. But systems biology is this idea that as we are able to collect more and more different modes of data, whether that be transcriptomics or metabolomics or
Yeah,
lipidomics, um, whatever it is, we should somehow be able to integrate this over time and be able to get a more precise picture of what is happening in a body.
yeah,
And I think that the way we have as a society with human too, I guess, ontologically tried to classify and segment disease, it served its purpose for symptom management, but if we're really trying to go after curative therapeutics, like disease modifying therapeutics for tough areas, I think we need a lot more data generated and analyzed before we can do that. There's a really great book called, I think it's called Systems Biology, by Yuri Alon.
okay,
He's a biologist and he essentially does mathematical modeling of like large scale biomedical concepts.
yeah,
So basically, a way to understand human physiology, aging, and disease. And that framework, I think, is something that will become more easily adopted as we move towards more data generation, more data collection, and more data analysis.
mhm.
Um, One of our portfolio companies is a company called Superpower. I'm not sure if you've heard of them
I
before.
have,
Yeah,
um,
so we got in pretty early there. They're our only one of our only consumer facing companies, but curious to know what you think about them.
yeah, I haven't looked too much into them, but I remember I seeing their concept even a few months ago. I'm not quite sure, but it seemed extremely interesting. I don't know, as well as the longevity aspect and so on, but really diagnosing, because it's based on tracking really all of your uh internal
Your
your
biomarkers.
biomarkers in a way that's almost real time, and you can
Yeah.
essentially very preventative of a lot of the diseases. And I think that's what we should be aiming for, is a lot of the prevention side. um how do you prevent diseases instead of trying to treat them in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. And if we do end up in a world where we have curative therapeutics for like really devastating disorders like ALS and rare genetic disease, then we start to think about how to live a better life that is, enhanced in some way. And that's kind of the premise behind Human Free, where we try to distribution shift the entire distribution. So not just the very sick people.
Hmm.
We don't want to just shift that distribution to healthy. We want to shift the healthy people to even healthier as well.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the filters we have when we're looking at companies and their technology too.
And it's just a trend I'm seeing, or at least from what I can tell, that people are discussing, or at least they're talking about a lot more, is this longevity aspect, is becoming a superhuman in a sense. How do you really biohack? This was kind of the term a few years ago, I think. but really
Yeah.
optimizing, yeah, your life to the point where you're avoiding a lot of the other diseases. And I wonder if that's gonna work, or if it's almost counterintuitive to the point that maybe you shouldn't overthink things and just live the way you want. It could be simpler that way.
It's funny because, there are a lot of people who are really extreme in this longevity space, especially living in the Bay Area. A lot of people are like, I don't want to die ever. I want to
Yeah.
upload my consciousness somewhere. And I think that overall, the longevity movement has been really positive because, at the very least, it's probably just made people try to think about making healthier decisions in their life. I think there might be some ways to enhance ourselves, sure. But I think one of the realities is that we've gotten better at treating some types of cancer, some types of cardiometabolic
Mhm.
disease, some types of other respiratory disease, for example. And so, on average, people are living a lot longer, and we're on track to live a lot longer. But there are other areas of medicine that are still very behind, like neuroscience. And so, do you want to live up until 120 with a great body, but like you're not really cognitively intact? I
Yeah.
don't know. I think what we try to do is maybe even out all of the tools that we have so that we can be collectively, holistically healthier for longer. But, you know, there is a limit, I think, to what it is that we can do.
Is it not Limitless? It reminds me of a movie because I watched Limitless recently. So if you ever come across a
Oh,
company
really?
that's doing some kind of NZT drug, call me.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, one could arguably say that the military has funded a lot of these types of drugs already, not to the limitless degree like in the movie,
Yeah.
but there's a long history of the military using psychoactive drugs to make their soldiers and military professionals just like cognitively superior. Like even the fighter pilots, they get dosed amphetamines and other types of drugs so that they can stay up for longer and
Yeah.
stuff. So it's not that far fetched.
Caffeine is like the normalized version.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, it's been a really great conversation, but I want to give you a possibility to just explain what are your next steps. Um, what is next for XEIA? What was that the name again?
XEIA.
XEIA, sorry. For XEIA, for
That's
you.
okay.
Um, and yeah, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, thank you. So we're excited to continue funding companies in this space. Brom and I are continuing to put out content to help founders understand what it is that we're looking for. We're excited about the market getting reestablished. I think, a lot of people have been talking about how the biotech markets have been bad lately. I think that is a lot of noise. Of course, it's bad, but I think we need to keep the mindset that we should move technology forward. So we're looking forward to just making more investments and helping these companies out. So if you're, starting a company and you think you fit into our human terrain thesis, please reach out. We'd love to chat with you. We're based in San Francisco. And as we talked about, we host a lot of events, including runs. So reach out to me. I'll be in Toronto, Canada in October.
Oh,
So
great.
I'm happy to meet Canadian founders there.
And there are all the tips for how to reach out to Sam in this podcast. We've discussed what email to draft. But what's the best place to reach out to you and follow what you're doing? LinkedIn, the website.
Yeah, LinkedIn, X, we have the Human Free podcast that's up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also YouTube. I think to get in touch with me specifically, a quick note on LinkedIn or email sam@xeivp.com. That's great too. But yeah, all of those will work. And if you mention that you heard me on a podcast,
Oh
it'll
yeah.
help me understand where they got the lead from.
For sure, for sure. All the links will be below. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Thomas.